It was a Sunday afternoon, and the summer sun was pouring through the living room windows, casting a warm glow over everything. I had just returned from a quick run to the grocery store, hoping to find something to make for dinner. As I put the bags down on the kitchen counter, my eyes fell on Jessica's leather handbag lying open on the couch. Jessica was out at her art class, a new hobby she'd recently taken up. I hadn't thought much of it at first. She seemed to genuinely enjoy it. But today, as I picked up her bag to move it out of the way, something caught my eye. A folded piece of paper peeking out from her purse. Curiosity got the better of me. I reached inside and pulled out the note. It was written in elegant, looping handwriting, something I'd never seen from Jessica. The paper was crisp, almost new, and the words jumped out at me. Jessica, I can't stop thinking about you. Every moment we spend together is a treasure. I'm counting the days until we can be together again. Michael. My heart raced. Michael? Who was Michael? I had never heard that name before. Jessica had always been open about her activities, but this was new. A sudden, unsettling thought crossed my mind. What if Jessica was seeing someone else? I tried to push the thought away, but the more I looked at the letter, the more the suspicion grew. I placed the letter back in her purse and tried to focus on the grocery bags, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that the letter had planted in my chest. It was clear that something was going on, and I needed to find out what. Jessica's art classes had seemed innocent enough, just another way for her to unwind. But now, with this letter in my hands, everything felt different. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. As I paced around the kitchen, my thoughts were a jumbled mess of confusion and anger. When Jessica came home later that evening, she was all smiles, her cheeks flushed from the summer heat and the excitement of her class, but I could barely look at her. The letter weighed heavily on my mind, and I could barely muster a smile in return. "How was your class?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed my unease. "It was great," Jessica replied as she started unpacking her supplies. "We worked on a new technique today. I think I'm finally getting the hang of it." I nodded, but the image of that letter remained vivid. I watched her with a growing sense of dread, knowing that our comfortable life was about to be disrupted in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The questions that swirled in my head were relentless. Who was Michael, and what did he mean to Jessica? What was really happening at those art classes? As the evening wore on, I knew one thing for sure. I had to dig deeper. The letter was just the beginning, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next few days felt like a blur of anxious anticipation. Each morning, I would check Jessica's bag, but there were no more letters. It seemed like my world had come to a standstill, waiting for the next piece of the puzzle to fall into place. Jessica continued her routine, as if nothing had changed. She would leave for her art class with her usual enthusiasm, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I tried to maintain normalcy, but inside, I was a storm of uncertainty and suspicion. On Wednesday, I decided it was time to see what this art class was all about. I couldn't let my doubts fester any longer. After work, I drove to the address listed on the flyer Jessica had shown me. The club was located in an old, converted warehouse on the edge of town. The once industrial space now housed a variety of art supplies and canvases. The building looked quiet and unassuming from the outside. I parked a few blocks away and approached on foot, trying to remain inconspicuous. As I neared the entrance, I could hear muffled voices and the faint sound of music. It was clear that there was more going on inside than I had anticipated. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed open the door. The interior was filled with the smell of paint and turpentine. The walls were adorned with vibrant, unfinished canvases and sketches. A group of people was gathered around, chatting animatedly while they worked on their art. Jessica was easy to spot, her long hair tied up in a messy bun, her face focused on a canvas. But what caught my attention more was the man standing beside her. He was tall and striking, with dark, tousled hair and a confident demeanor. It was Michael. I tried to blend in, taking a seat at an empty easel in the corner, pretending to be interested in the art supplies. From my vantage point, I could see that Michael was not just a participant, but the instructor. He moved with an ease and charisma that seemed to captivate everyone around him. As the class continued, I watched them interact. Michael's hands would occasionally brush against Jessica's as he adjusted her canvas. They shared private jokes and exchanged knowing glances. It was clear that there was more than just a professional relationship between them. At one point, Michael leaned in close to Jessica, his voice low and intimate. She responded with a smile that was so genuine, it almost made my heart ache. It was a look that spoke of shared secrets and deep connections, things that should have been reserved for a marriage, not for an art class. The evening wore on, and Jessica seemed to lose track of time. Michael's presence was magnetic, and it was evident that he enjoyed the attention. They spent a lot of time together, their conversation flowing easily. I couldn't help but feel like an outsider in a world I had thought was part of my life. When the class finally ended, the students began to pack up their supplies. Michael said his goodbyes, and Jessica joined him at the exit. They walked out together, laughing and chatting. My heart sank as I followed them discreetly, keeping a safe distance. They didn't head directly home. Instead, they went to a small cafe down the street. I parked across from it and watched through the window. They were seated in a secluded booth, their conversation animated. Jessica's laughter was light and carefree, while Michael's gaze was intense, filled with admiration. The cafe was closing soon, and I saw them linger over their coffee, their closeness undeniable. They parted with a warm hug and a promise to see each other soon. As Jessica walked back to her car, she looked happy, completely unaware of the turmoil she had caused. I drove home with a heavy heart, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. It was clear now that Jessica and Michael had something more than just a friendship. The evidence was irrefutable, and the reality of the situation was beginning to set in. The man who had been so charming and engaging in the art class was the same one who had written that letter, and Jessica's growing attachment to him was something I couldn't ignore. I needed to confront her, but I wanted to be prepared. I needed to gather more information and be sure of what I was dealing with before taking any drastic steps. The thought of facing her was daunting, but I knew that I couldn't let this continue. I had to find a way to address the situation, no matter how painful it might be. The next move was crucial, and I had to tread carefully to uncover the full truth. The days that followed felt like an endless loop of tension and doubt. I kept a close eye on Jessica's schedule, marking each art class on my calendar. I needed to understand her relationship with Michael more deeply, so I could approach the situation with a clear head. By Friday, I had gathered enough evidence to convince me that something significant was going on. Jessica's mood had shifted slightly. She seemed more distant, preoccupied. Despite my growing anxiety, I knew I had to act carefully. I needed more concrete evidence before confronting her. That evening, I decided to enlist the help of a close friend, David. We had known each other for years, and his level-headed approach was exactly what I needed. I met him at a local diner, and after exchanging pleasantries, I shared my concerns. "I found this letter in Jessica's bag," I said, sliding the note across the table. "And I've seen her with Michael more times than I can count. I just don't know what to do." David read the letter and looked up, his expression serious. "This is pretty damning evidence, but it's still just one side of the story. You need to be absolutely sure before you confront her. Have you thought about gathering more evidence? Maybe even talking to Michael directly?" I nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. I need to find out more about their relationship. I want to be certain before I make any accusations." David agreed, and we made a plan. I decided to follow Jessica again and see if I could gather more information. I wanted to confront Michael with all the facts, not just suspicion. David offered to help by providing a cover story if needed, which could be useful if I needed to interact with Michael directly. The next art class was on Monday, and I was prepared. I arrived at the warehouse early and waited for Jessica to show up. As the class began, I slipped into the back, trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible. I observed Jessica and Michael closely, noting their interactions. Michael seemed to be more attentive to Jessica than to anyone else in the class. He would often stand behind her, guiding her hand as she painted, his breath warm against her neck. They shared private jokes and exchanged lingering looks. The intimacy was undeniable. After the class ended, I followed Jessica and Michael once more. They headed to the same cafe, and I managed to find a spot where I could see them through the window without being noticed. This time, the conversation was more intense, and they appeared more affectionate. As they spoke, I overheard snippets of their conversation. Michael was asking about Jessica's plans for the weekend, and she mentioned a dinner she was looking forward to. Michael's response was warm and encouraging, but it was clear that their plans were not strictly about art. It was time to take the next step. I approached the cafe manager and asked if he knew Michael. The manager confirmed that Michael was a regular customer and that he often brought guests. I was given a brief description of Michael's background. He was an artist who had recently moved to town and was popular in the local art community. Armed with this information, I decided it was time to speak with Michael directly. I waited until he was alone, then approached him under the guise of being an interested art enthusiast. "Hi, Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice friendly. "I've heard a lot about your classes. They seem really popular." Michael looked at me with a friendly smile. "Oh, thanks. I'm glad you're interested. It's always great to meet people who appreciate art." I took a deep breath. "Actually, I was hoping to ask you about Jessica. She's mentioned your classes often, and I was curious about how she's been doing." Michael's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. "Jessica's a talented student. She's been making great progress. Is there something specific you wanted to know?" I carefully steered the conversation, trying to gauge his reactions and get more information. Michael was polite but evasive, giving only general answers about Jessica's progress in class. It was clear he was guarding something. After our conversation, I left the cafe feeling more conflicted than ever. Michael was charming and evasive, and he didn't give away much. However, the way he spoke about Jessica hinted at a deeper connection that went beyond mere teacher-student interaction. With this new information, I felt I was getting closer to understanding the full picture. I had enough to confront Jessica now, but I needed to prepare for the fallout. I had to think carefully about how to approach her, ensuring that I had all the facts laid out clearly. The next few days were filled with a mix of dread and resolve. I knew the confrontation would be difficult, but it was necessary to bring the truth to light. As I prepared to talk to Jessica, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held and how this revelation would change everything between us. I spent the weekend wrestling with my thoughts, trying to come up with the best approach for the conversation I was about to have with Jessica. I knew this was going to be one of the hardest conversations of my life, but it was necessary to confront the truth and lay everything out on the table. Monday evening arrived, and Jessica was due home from her art class. I had spent the day preparing what I would say, trying to keep my emotions in check. I wanted to be calm and rational, but inside, I was bracing myself for the storm that was about to hit. As I waited for Jessica to come through the door, I paced around the living room, my mind racing. I had already gathered enough evidence to be certain that something was going on between her and Michael. The letter, the intimate interactions, and the private conversations all pointed to the same conclusion. Finally, the door opened, and Jessica walked in, her face bright and cheerful from her class. She was carrying a new painting she'd been working on, a vibrant canvas that she had been eager to show me. As she set the painting down, she noticed my serious expression and immediately sensed that something was wrong. "Hey, what's up?" she asked, her tone a mix of concern and confusion. "You look like something's bothering you." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Jessica, we need to talk. It's important." Her smile faded, and she set her things down, turning to face me with a look of apprehension. "What's going on?" I gestured for her to sit down on the couch, and I took a seat opposite her. I pulled out the letter from Michael that I had kept in my drawer. Her eyes widened as she saw it, and she glanced up at me, clearly uneasy. "Jessica, I found this letter in your bag," I began, holding up the note. "It's from someone named Michael. I've seen you with him at your art class, and I've noticed that you two seem very close. I need you to explain what's going on." Jessica's face turned pale as she looked at the letter. She swallowed hard, clearly struggling to find the right words. I didn't know how to tell you," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Michael and I— Jessica, please don't try to justify this," I interrupted, trying to keep my composure. "I've seen you with him. I know there's something more than just a student-teacher relationship. How long has this been going on?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked down at her lap, unable to meet my gaze. "It started a few months ago. I was feeling so lost and disconnected, and Michael was there for me. He's been so understanding and supportive. I didn't mean for it to happen, but we've become close." I felt a pang of betrayal and sadness. "So you've been seeing him romantically? How could you keep this from me?" "I didn't know how to tell you," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I understand why you're upset. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't know how to stop it." Her words did little to soothe the hurt I was feeling. I'd always trusted her, and now that trust felt shattered. "Jessica, how can I believe anything you say now? This isn't just about you and Michael. It's about our relationship, our life together. How can we move past this?" She reached out, taking my hand in hers, but I pulled away. "I'm so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know I've made a terrible mistake. I just hope that we can find a way to fix this, but I understand if you can't forgive me." I stood up, feeling overwhelmed. "I need time to process all of this," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "I need to figure out what's best for us. I can't make any decisions right now." Jessica nodded, her face a picture of despair. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll give you space to think." As she left the room, I was left alone with my thoughts. The weight of the conversation hung heavy in the air, and I felt a deep sense of loss and confusion. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship was now fractured, and I was unsure of how to rebuild it. I knew I had to take time to reflect on everything that had happened. This was a turning point in our lives, and the future was uncertain. What mattered now was how we would move forward, whether we could repair the damage and rebuild what we had, or if this was the end of the road for us. For now, I had to focus on finding clarity and understanding my own feelings. The path ahead was daunting, but it was one I had to navigate on my own, no matter how painful it might be. The days after our confrontation were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. Jessica gave me the space I needed, retreating to her studio to focus on her art, while I stayed in the house, trying to make sense of everything. The atmosphere was heavy with unresolved tension, and every corner of our home seemed to echo with the silence of our strained relationship. I spent most of my time reflecting on the past and considering our future. The house felt emptier than usual, and the absence of Jessica's laughter and warmth made me realize how much I had taken those moments for granted. One evening, I decided to seek the advice of David again. He had been supportive throughout this ordeal, and I needed a fresh perspective. We met at the same diner, and I brought along a notebook filled with my thoughts and questions. I needed clarity on how to move forward. David listened intently as I spoke. "I'm torn, David. On one hand, I want to believe that Jessica is genuinely remorseful and that we could rebuild what we had. On the other hand, I'm struggling to see how we could ever go back to the way things were." David nodded, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "It's understandable to feel that way. Rebuilding trust takes time and effort from both sides. Jessica's actions have caused a significant breach, and it's going to be a long process if you decide to work things out." I sighed heavily. "And what if I decide it's too much to overcome? What if we can't fix this?" David placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It's important to remember that you need to do what's best for your own well-being. Whether that means working through the issues with Jessica or moving on, it has to be a decision you make for yourself." His words were a comfort, but the decision still felt overwhelming. I knew that no matter what path I chose, there would be challenges ahead. I needed to approach the situation with a clear head, focusing on what was right for me and what would allow me to heal. Later that week, I decided to have a follow-up conversation with Jessica. It was clear that we both needed to address our issues directly and make a decision about the future of our relationship. I asked her to meet me at a neutral location, a small park near our home where we could talk without the pressure of being at home. Jessica arrived looking somber but determined. We sat on a bench, the cool evening breeze offering a brief respite from the heat of our earlier discussions. The park was quiet, a peaceful backdrop for what was about to be a difficult conversation. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I've tried to come to terms with everything that's happened, and I need to know where we stand." Jessica looked at me, her eyes full of a mixture of hope and sadness. "I've been thinking a lot too. I know I've made mistakes, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I'm committed to working on our relationship if you're willing to give us a chance." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "Jessica, I appreciate your willingness to work on things, but trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to require us both to be completely honest and open with each other." Jessica nodded. "I understand. I'm ready to be open and honest, and I hope you can find it in yourself to give us a chance. The conversation continued as we discussed what steps we would need to take to address the issues in our relationship. We agreed to seek couples therapy to help us navigate the complexities of rebuilding trust. It was clear that professional guidance would be essential in helping us understand and resolve the underlying issues. As we left the park, there was a tentative sense of hope between us. The path forward was uncertain, and there were no guarantees, but we both understood that our commitment to working through this would be crucial. The following weeks were a period of intense emotional work. Therapy sessions provided a safe space for us to explore our feelings and address the damage that had been done. It was a painful process, but it also offered us an opportunity to communicate more effectively and to begin healing. There were days when the weight of the situation felt almost unbearable, and doubts about the future crept in. Yet, there were also moments of clarity and connection, where we started to remember why we had been together in the first place. Ultimately, the journey ahead was one we would face together, navigating the challenges and uncertainties with a renewed commitment to each other. The future remained unpredictable, but for now, we were taking the first steps toward healing and rebuilding, determined to create a stronger foundation for whatever came next. The weeks following our decision to seek therapy were a whirlwind of emotions and challenges. Every session was a mix of painful revelations and glimmers of hope. The road to rebuilding our relationship was neither straightforward nor easy, but it was a path we both committed to navigating. Jessica and I attended our therapy sessions diligently. Our therapist, Dr. Harris, was an experienced professional who helped us dig deep into the underlying issues in our relationship. She encouraged open communication and provided us with tools to manage our emotions and rebuild trust. One of the first exercises we undertook was to write down our feelings and thoughts about the betrayal. It was a cathartic experience, allowing us to express our pain and confusion in a structured way. Reading each other's written accounts was difficult, but it helped us understand the depth of our hurt and the impact of the infidelity. In our sessions, we addressed several key areas. 1. Understanding the betrayal. We explored the reasons behind Jessica's actions and the factors that contributed to her seeking comfort outside our marriage. It was important for me to understand her perspective, just as it was crucial for her to grasp the extent of my pain. 2. Rebuilding trust. Dr. Harris emphasized that rebuilding trust was a gradual process. We discussed setting small, achievable goals to demonstrate our commitment to each other. Transparency and honesty became our guiding principles. 3. Effective communication. We practiced active listening and constructive feedback. The goal was to communicate more openly and empathetically, avoiding blame and focusing on understanding each other's needs and concerns. 4. Individual reflection. We each engaged in personal reflection to address our own emotional wounds and insecurities. This individual work was essential for personal growth and for contributing positively to our relationship. One notable breakthrough came during a session when Jessica and I had a candid conversation about our needs and expectations. Jessica expressed her deep remorse and her commitment to making amends. She admitted that she had been struggling with feelings of inadequacy and isolation, which contributed to her actions. I realize now that I should have communicated my feelings instead of seeking solace elsewhere, Jessica said, her voice trembling. I want to make things right, and I need to learn how to be more open and honest with you. I responded with my own revelations. I've been feeling betrayed and hurt, but I also understand that we both have areas we need to work on. I'm willing to give this a chance, but I need to see consistent effort from both of us. Our sessions with Dr. Harris were interspersed with moments of tension and breakthroughs. On good days, we would make progress, enjoying small victories in our communication and understanding. On difficult days, we would confront raw emotions and relive painful memories. Outside of therapy, we tried to reintroduce some of the activities that had once brought us joy. We planned weekend outings and engaged in shared hobbies, attempting to reconnect on a personal level. These moments were not without their challenges, but they were also a chance to create new, positive memories. One Saturday, we decided to visit a local art exhibit. Jessica had always enjoyed art, and I hoped that revisiting this shared interest might help us reconnect. The exhibit was filled with vibrant paintings and sculptures, And as we walked through the gallery, we found ourselves discussing the artwork with genuine interest. "I remember when we used to come to places like this all the time," Jessica said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "We used to dream about creating art together." I smiled, feeling a flicker of the old connection. Maybe we can start doing that again, not just visiting galleries, but actually creating something together. We left the exhibit with a renewed sense of optimism. It was clear that while the road to rebuilding was long and fraught with obstacles, there were moments of genuine connection and hope. We were both committed to the process, determined to work through our issues and rebuild our relationship on a stronger foundation. The journey ahead remained uncertain, and the future was still a mix of hope and apprehension. But for now, we were taking positive steps forward, guided by our commitment to understanding, healing, and ultimately, rebuilding our relationship. The path was far from easy, but we faced it together, each step a testament to our dedication to making things right. As the weeks turned into months, Jessica and I continued our therapy sessions, striving to mend the cracks in our relationship. The work was arduous, but we were both dedicated to the process. We had made some progress in rebuilding trust and communication, but there was always an underlying tension as we navigated the aftermath of Jessica's infidelity. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Jessica's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She was in the other room, finishing up a painting, so I took a quick glance at the screen. The message preview that appeared was from a number I didn't recognize. "I need to talk. It's important. Michael." Asterisk. My heart skipped a beat. Michael? Why would he be contacting Jessica now? And why through a message like that? I tried to calm my racing thoughts and set the phone back down before Jessica entered the room. "Dinner's almost ready," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Jessica came into the kitchen, her face slightly flushed from her painting session. "Thanks, I'm starving," she said, taking a seat at the table. As we ate, my mind kept drifting back to the message. I decided it was best to address it openly. "Jessica, I noticed that you received a message from Michael earlier. Is there something going on that I should know about?" Jessica's fork paused midair, and she looked at me, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. "Oh, that. Michael wanted to talk about some unfinished business. I haven't replied yet." I could sense that there was more to the story, and I needed to understand it fully. What kind of unfinished business? And why does it need to be addressed now? Jessica sighed, setting her fork down. "Michael and I have been trying to sort things out on our end as well. He's been wanting closure, and I think he feels like there are unresolved issues that need to be addressed." I felt a pang of unease. "Closure? You mean after everything that's happened, he's still seeking something from you?" Jessica nodded, looking down. "Yes, and I've been trying to avoid it, but he's been persistent. I think it's important for both of us to move on completely, but I wasn't sure how to handle it." The conversation left me unsettled. I understood that closure was important, but the idea of Jessica meeting with Michael again stirred up a whirlwind of emotions. It felt like a step backward, and I struggled to reconcile this with our efforts to rebuild our relationship. Later that night, as Jessica went to bed, I found myself unable to sleep. My mind was racing with doubts and questions. I decided to take a walk to clear my head, hoping that some fresh air might provide a new perspective. As I walked through the quiet streets, my thoughts were interrupted by a message notification on my phone. It was from David, asking if I wanted to meet up. I accepted, knowing that I could use a friend's advice. When I met David at a late-night cafe, I filled him in on the latest development. "Jessica received a message from Michael. He wants to talk about unfinished business, and I'm not sure how to handle it." David listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "It sounds like a tough situation. If you're feeling uncomfortable about Jessica meeting with Michael, it's important to communicate that to her. Your feelings and boundaries are valid, and she needs to understand that." I nodded, appreciating his perspective. I just don't want to feel like I'm holding her back from something she needs to do, but at the same time, I don't want to feel like our progress is being undermined. David offered a reassuring smile. "It's a delicate balance. You both need to address your own needs and boundaries. If you're uncomfortable with her meeting Michael, it's okay to express that. At the same time, it's important to have an open conversation about what closure means and how it affects your relationship." With David's advice in mind, I returned home with a sense of resolve. The next morning, I sat down with Jessica before she left for her art class. I wanted to express my concerns honestly and ensure that we were on the same page. Jessica, I began, I need to talk to you about Michael's request for closure. I understand that this is something you might feel is necessary, but I'm also feeling uneasy about it. Can we find a way to address this that respects both our needs and boundaries? Jessica looked at me with a mix of understanding and regret. I see your point. I didn't realize how much this was affecting you. Let's talk about how we can handle this situation together. We spent the next hour discussing our feelings and finding a compromise. We agreed that while Jessica could respond to Michael's request, we would establish clear boundaries to ensure that it wouldn't disrupt our ongoing efforts to rebuild our relationship. We would both be open and honest about our feelings throughout the process. As Jessica prepared to address Michael's message, I felt a renewed sense of determination. The road to rebuilding was fraught with challenges, but facing them together, with clear communication and mutual respect, was the way forward. The path was still uncertain, but taking these steps together was a testament to our commitment to each other and our future. The decision was made. Jessica would respond to Michael's message, but with clear boundaries in place to ensure it wouldn't interfere with our relationship. I felt a mix of anxiety and relief as we prepared for what would be a pivotal moment in our journey. Jessica agreed to meet Michael at a cafe downtown, a neutral and public location that felt less intimate and safer given the circumstances. We had discussed the importance of keeping things straightforward and not allowing any lingering emotions to complicate the situation. On the day of the meeting, Jessica was unusually quiet as she prepared to leave. She dressed carefully, choosing something that was neither too casual nor too formal, which I interpreted as her attempt to strike a balance between professionalism and personal comfort. I offered a supportive nod as she left, feeling a pang of unease, but trusting that we had set the right boundaries. I decided to spend the time at home, preparing for our therapy session later in the evening. I needed to focus on the tasks that would help me manage my own emotions and keep myself grounded. I tried to stay busy, working on some home improvements and organizing our living space. Keeping my mind occupied was the only way I could manage the anxiety that had become a constant companion. A few hours later, I received a text from Jessica. The meeting is over. Let's talk when you get home. Asterisk. The brevity of the message left me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. When Jessica returned home, her demeanor was subdued but composed. She set her things down and joined me in the living room. I could see the signs of emotional exhaustion in her eyes, but she was determined to communicate openly. Are you okay? I asked, my voice filled with concern. Jessica took a deep breath before answering. The meeting went as well as it could. Michael wanted to talk about his feelings and get some closure. I listened and answered his questions honestly. It was an emotional conversation, but I think it helped us both move forward. I nodded, trying to mask my concern. And how do you feel about it? Jessica sighed, rubbing her temples. It was difficult, but I feel like it was necessary. Michael needed to express his thoughts, and I needed to clarify things for him. It was hard to revisit those emotions, but I think we've both gotten the closure we needed. As we sat together, I could see that Jessica was visibly drained. It was clear that the meeting had taken an emotional toll on her. I decided to focus on the positive aspects of the situation and offer support. I'm glad you were able to get through it, I said gently. I hope this helps you both find some peace, but I want to make sure that we don't let this process disrupt our progress. Jessica looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude. I appreciate your understanding. It was important to address things with Michael, but I'm also committed to working on our relationship. I hope we can continue to move forward together. Our therapy session that evening was a chance to debrief and process the meeting. Dr. Harris encouraged us to share our feelings and reactions to the events of the day. Jessica spoke about the emotional impact of meeting Michael and the relief she felt in finally closing that chapter. It was important to me to have that conversation, Jessica said, but I also realized that it's a step toward moving forward with you. I'm committed to working on our relationship and making things right. Dr. Harris nodded, acknowledging the significance of Jessica's experience. It's clear that you've both taken important steps in addressing the past. The key now is to focus on how you can continue to support each other and build a stronger foundation for the future. As we left the therapy session, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead was still challenging, but we were facing it together with a commitment to open communication and mutual respect. The meeting with Michael was a necessary part of our healing process, and now it was time to focus on our own journey. Jessica and I spent the rest of the evening discussing our next steps and reinforcing our commitment to each other. We talked about the goals we wanted to achieve in our relationship and how we could continue to support each other through the healing process. The path to rebuilding our relationship was far from over, but we were determined to face it with honesty and dedication. Each step forward, no matter how small, was a sign of progress. We knew that the future was uncertain, but we were committed to navigating it together, one step at a time.